you should not look at the enterprise architecture as an IT role. When you try to simplify it, it kind of loses everything it has. Everything is not in place. It's laying around on the floors. So then I come in as an architect and I say, hey, what if I will analyze your room? I will try to create a plan for you how you can arrange all the things in your room in the way that it will take you not more than, like, say, 5 seconds to find your favorite toy. And I see how their career progressed. Like, all of them are lead BAs right now, like all of them.
Hello, everybody. It's Yuri Goman, and today I have another great guest for you. My guest for today is Kyrylo Bieliavskyi, Business Analysis Office Director at SoftServe. Kyrylo is my dear friend and business analysis content creator on YouTube, and he shares a lot on the topic. Today, we will talk about business architecture and enterprise architecture, two professions that are very secluded. Not that many people have those titles, and Kyrylo have been enthusiast on those topics for many years and even got the TOGAF certification. Today we will talk about the skills and responsibilities of business and enterprise architects, what they do in companies, and how to become one.
What is weird about me? I'm not certified business analyst, but I'm a certified enterprise architect, which is really weird because, like, most of my work is business analysis. Nevertheless, so I think, like, to answer your question, we probably should define what is an architecture in essence. Yeah, and, like, when we talk about architecture, will it be like in construction or in software or in business? It's like about structuring the components and their relationships and the principles and, like, the guidelines of, like, how they build together. Yeah, so if you want to build, let's say, a house, first you need to create an architecture project for that house, because if you omit that and just start, bringing rocks in and trying to build something, yeah, of course you may succeed at some point, but eventually the structure will break. Yeah, it will not tolerate the, I don't know, external factors. It will, like, not be livable, stuff like that. So it's very similar approach to software architecture, to business architecture, and enterprise architecture. So when we talk about, like, we defined architecture in general. Now, if we talk about enterprise architecture, it's basically the same thing. It's the structure of components of the enterprise, their interrelationships, and, like, the principles and guidelines which are governing, like, the design of this enterprise. And again, I think we should define what enterprise is. Yeah, once we're talking about that. So the enterprise is usually, like in TOGAF, it's very simple. It's very simple definition. It's like a collection of organization that has a common set of goals. But for me, I think it's, you have to at least add size and complexity to that, because when we talk about enterprise, it's large organizations with a lot of complicated interdependencies and, like, complicated structure and org chart and whatever. So when we talk about enterprise architecture, it's about architecting the enterprise the best way possible so it can meet all the goals that it has and it can be effective on its way. And sorry for that long long intro to the answer to that question, but you have to give all that background to be able to answer that. And when we talk about enterprise architecture, we usually, like, talk about different domains, and they call it, like, BDAT, so business, data, application, and technology. And that's all, like, builds the enterprise architecture framework, let's put it like that. When we talk about business architecture, that's like in-depth uh, look into that uh, business domain. Yeah, so it's basically focusing on the business side of the enterprise or of the organization.
Yes, absolutely. And actually, the definitions that are out in the internet, or if you ask some tool like ChatGPT, they don't provide such broad answer. Usually, they focus on stuff like, okay, enterprise architecture is about IT, business architecture is about business. So they don't uncover, most of the resources don't uncover the depth of what you actually shared. But in a nutshell, that's
Mhm.
true, isn't it? So business architecture is about business branches, new business functions, maybe new business divisions, and how business operates. So basically, people who
Mhm.
do business architecture, they probably go to positions like CEO, CFO at some point, wherever they started. So it's that set of C-level positions. At the same time, those people who did enterprise architecture, they might have become like CTO of the company or any other kind of technical role. It doesn't stop them from other C-level roles, but that's probably the career path out from business enterprise architecture, isn't it?
Yes and no. I mean, you're right, of course. Like the CTO can come from the enterprise architecture background, but he can also come from like a software architecture background. And when we talk about enterprise, it's like a wider term. Enterprise is more than just software, which helps this enterprise to work. Enterprise is more than data, which is stored in this enterprise and holds its operation. And enterprise is not only like the business parts of the organization. So you have to account for all of these domains, and this is why this is like this be that thing that it's in TOGAF framework, because it's like a wider thing. So, and usually when we're talking about enterprise architecture, there is really hard to imagine that just one person, even like it can be called an enterprise architect, can do the whole enterprise architecture project. So he would need a subject matter expert, another architect, like a data architect, an application architect, or just in general software architect, if we are talking about this application and technology domain. Maybe like you would need a person who would do like an infrastructure and security and other stuff for your software architecture in the company. So it's like, imagine an enterprise in as a whole. Yeah, it has like a lot of different parts. It has a lot of different moving objects inside it. It's like a living system basically, and constantly adapting system. There's like, imagine when you have to just describe all the processes in the enterprise. Have you encountered projects like that? Now you have to model all the processes. Yeah. So once you start with this task, you will need, like, I don't know, depending on the size of the enterprise, like 6 to 9 months to when you're fully done, fully completed. And when you're done with that task, you can throw this pile of diagrams away because everything has changed by that time. And that's the enterprise. It's a very complex system. So enterprise architecture and so enterprise architecture is about making all this stuff work and being effective in essence. And talking about career paths, I mean, I would envision an enterprise architect becoming a CTO, but I can also envision an enterprise architect becoming a CEO of a certain company. So I wouldn't define like it's very strict career paths for these people. And for me, it's is the best definition for the career path for enterprise architect or business architect is consulting. Yeah. So basically, this is a consultant who should join the architecture project. Those projects are quite long. It can take years for a large enterprise. Finalize this project and move on to the next consulting project.
I see your point. Well, yeah, I wouldn't say that the only way for enterprise architect is to become CTO. Of course, if we're talking, for example, about some product startup, some technological startup, people who know about this technology, they also become CEOs and founders, and they do great job. Absolutely. And the consultancy is also like the thing that you could do both as a business architect and enterprise architect. That's absolutely true. It's just, the standard or default career path that you can choose. Or it's like when people see the career in any company, they see career usually vertically, right? Of course, there's horizontal movement as well. But if we talk about how we go from step to step in each profession, right? How we ascend to the highest roles, that's probably the closest thing you do, closest thing to enterprise architect, some technical position within the company, within an IT company, right? I'm not sure, by the way, are there any enterprise architect positions outside IT?
Yes, of course. Like you should not look at the enterprise architecture as an IT role, right? Because now it's hard to imagine any kind of organization without IT component. So of course IT component is there, but essence of enterprise architecture is making stuff work in the enterprise as a whole. And you usually start from business side and make sure everything is aligned, like your organization is aligned, your business processes are aligned to the goals of the organizations, to the mission of organization, to the drivers. And then you making sure that like your governance is in place, your business rules are in place. And then and the business always is the key component. You should not build an enterprise around a certain system, right? This is very similar for business analysis. The business should not be wrapped around the system. System should be agile enough to meet the business expectations, yeah, and provide the necessary functionality. So the same thing goes for the enterprise architecture, but on the broader scale. So your IT components should fit into the whole enterprise. What's the proper word for that? Enterprise environment, and principles on how and what software you use. Like, do you have something like customly developed for you, or you're using like some commercial off the shelf products? uh, how you store, how you provide data for this applications, etc. Let's not confuse those terms. Enterprise architects work with the enterprise, and software architects, they work with software.
Business architects, they work on business functions, they work on business divisions and how business operates in general and what could be
Right.
done to make business better. At the same time, enterprise
Mhm.
architects, they also work with business first, with business goals, with
Right.
business objectives, but they focus or use, or maybe the better word would be operate with IT infrastructure, processes, governance,
Correct.
and stuff. So it's like for business architects, IT is one of the many tools. For enterprise architects, IT is their job, and process and governance as a theme that makes business better. Could you say that?
Yes, I can agree with that. So the enterprise as a whole is a wider thing. Yeah. So enterprise architect works with a wider set of domains. And of course, he needs to encounter for software, infrastructure, etc. Whether business architects focuses mainly on the business side of organization.
Anyway, we describe business and enterprise architects in general, in a nutshell. Now let's dive into what they do day to day. Do you have a vision of daily responsibilities, how the day may look like, what they work with, and stuff like that?
I do, but that is a hard question to answer because it's not something of a kind of routine thing that you're doing. It's very similar to what business analysts actually do. They have a lot of so like if we talk about what business analysts do, the three main directions of their work is communication, analysis, and documentation. And it's very similar for enterprise architects or business architect. They're eventually doing the same thing. They communicate a lot, they create a lot of documentation, and they do a lot of analysis. And let's define the typical deliverables from the business architect or an enterprise architect, because they're really similar. So they could be delivering like value streams, capability maps, some sort of application architectures, meaning like diagrams, uh, documents which describe those diagrams, which may be called like architecture visions. They're doing a lot of concepts. And on that level, it's like a lot of communication and analysis and documentation. Yeah. So basically, day to day work of the uh, architect, the enterprise architect, would be meeting with stakeholders, eliciting requirements, and conceptualizing solutions on the enterprise or business level. And the deliverables from those conceptions would be the things that I've mentioned. Yeah, they could be like value streams, they could be like capability maps, different types of views, like diagrams, etc. And then so it could take a lot of time, yeah. So you cannot just say like a day-to-day job will be just that. But once the architect is done with all of that, then we need to implement this project, yeah, the architecture project. So basically there's a lot of change management as well, so you and the project management as well. So you will launch in some sort of architecture project which will make necessary changes in the enterprise that you are architecting, because like the eventual goal of the business architect or an enterprise architect or a business analyst, if we talk about that, is to take the solution from the as is state, which is not very good, to the to be state, which is better, which is bringing more value, which meets the goals and expectations of key stakeholders. And in the case of the enterprise architect, this solution is the enterprise itself. So this is the key difference. Yeah. So if we talk about like IT business analysis, like you're working with some sort of IT solution or with some sort of system. When we're talking about enterprise architecture, you're working with the enterprise as a whole, and the enterprise, the newer version of this enterprise, or the target state of this enterprise, is your solution. And you have to bring the enterprise from the state which it is today, like from your baseline state, to the target state. I don't know if that answers your question. It's really hard to, pinpoint stuff. Like it's a lot of communication, diagramming, just chatting with people, emailing and stuff. It doesn't look different from what the BA does on a day-to-day basis.
Well, that's absolutely true. And well, I do get the idea, right? At the same time, I assume that there are maybe people who watching this for the first time and they don't know what are those things. Maybe business analysts who worked with a lot of projects, maybe seniors, maybe intermediate, but they never heard about business and the enterprise architecture. So maybe we could use some kind of down to the earth explanation, like explain this to me like to 5 year old.
Yeah, Yuri, I've tried that. I've started, being interested in enterprise architecture, I think in 2018. And since I'm like a big enthusiast and I like to involve people and, bring and share knowledge, I try to create some, like dive in sessions for business analysts to the enterprise architecture. And all the time, the feedback that I hear, it's too complicated, man. You have to simplify it. And I'm trying and I'm trying and I'm trying and I'm failing constantly because it's too complicated domain that when you try to simplify it, it kind of loses everything it has. So, but let me try one more time. So imagine like you're a 5 year old and imagine your room, yeah, and your room is usually very messy, yeah, as there's a lot of things lying around. You stumble on those things, and let's say you measure the effectiveness of your room is how fast you can find a certain thing and bring it to me, yeah, if I ask you. And when you meet this task, when you meet with this task, you are failing because it takes a lot of time to find a certain thing, like a certain toy, for example, that I want you to bring to me, because everything is not in place. It's laying around on the floor, something like is behind the couch, etc. So and you see this problem, yeah, you see this problem when you want to find this toy and you want to play, let's say, with your friends, but you cannot find your favorite toy. It is very bad for you, yeah, it makes you feel bad, and your results are not that good. So then I come in as an architect and I say, hey, what if I will analyze your room, what it has, what capacities it has, what capabilities it has, and I will try to create a plan for you how you can arrange all the things in your room in the way that it will take you not more than, like, say, 5 seconds to find your favorite toy or any kind of toy. Would that be interesting to you? I'm not sure what the 5 year old would answer, but I mean, like, imagine if you take into the enterprise scale, I think it's a good suggestion. And then what I do, I just analyze, okay, how big is this room? What shelves are there? Like, what capacities are there? Like, where you can put stuff? What stuff is there? I analyze it. I may think like, yeah, we need to add something. We may need to add a building block to your architecture, and building block is a professional term. So let's say we need, let's say, an extra shelf, yeah, or we need a cupboard, or we need like some sort of bag. So we will add those building blocks, and then we will arrange your room in a way that you can find everything very fast, and it's very convenient and nice and easy living there. And I will create this plan based on this work that I do. I will analyze the baseline state. I will plan some projects, what has to be done. The shelves has to be put on the wall, and we have to do some cleaning. Maybe we should replace some elements of your room. Maybe we can use like an extra space somewhere. And then, with this plan, we can do this project. And by the end of this project, you will have a very clean room, which will help you to find any toy as soon as you need it. And you can play with your friends, and you have enough room to invite your friends there. So, a lot of benefits. So, maybe this is something, and I think this is my best try so far, how you can explain that to a 5-year old.
That's a great explanation, actually. You almost lost me at capabilities and capacities as a 5-year-old, but otherwise,
Right,
yeah, then you got
right,
back on
yeah.
track. Yeah, that's a great explanation, actually, and I think that it shows the complexity and at the same time the importance of business architecture and enterprise architecture. What is the usual collaboration style with other roles? What other roles business architects collaborate with a lot? Of course, there are like business stakeholders, but I suppose there are more roles that are important for their job.
Definitely. So we can split those roles or those groups of people into maybe two different areas. First are the business stakeholders and representatives of the enterprise, and the other part is the, let's say, it's called architecture board. So as I mentioned earlier, you cannot do an architecture by yourself. Yeah, as one person, I don't see this happening. Maybe there are examples out there, but I'm not aware of that. So you need to hire more architects in your team. Yeah, so you as an enterprise architect, you would be the leader of the team. You would be defining, let's say, the architecture roadmap. You will be defining the architecture concept, but you will need your helpers for all the other domains, as we mentioned. And if we stick with this BDAT framework, so you would need a business helper, a business architect, or a business analyst. It also can be done by a business analyst. So this person would have to dive deeper into business side of the enterprise and work on the deliverables on the business architecture. Then you will have an application architect. So that probably would be a software architect. You will have to have someone like a database architect or a data architect who would define, say, some data concepts. So these architects will have also their own teams. So this business analyst may hire or may involve more business analysts, and the architect may involve like a data scientist or data analyst to work with the data, depending on the complexity of our enterprise. So this would be your architecture team. You would be defining the direction for this team, and you will be responsible for making sure that all of these architectures and all of these concepts that they develop align. Yeah, because you cannot have them, business working in one way, applications are meeting other goals, and like technology or infrastructure is not meeting what the application needs to have. Yeah, so it all has to be aligned, and your job would be to align all this stuff. On the other hand, you will work with your business stakeholders. You would probably work with the CEO of the company, because enterprise architecture project, it's such a fundamental change that it touches almost every section of the enterprise. So you will have to work with the uh, C-level stakeholders, but you would also have to work with all the stakeholders from all the departments which you are touching as part of your project. And it's very important to understand there is a term architecture called views and viewpoints. So viewpoints is where you're standing at, and view is what you're seeing. And it's very important to capture all the necessary views and viewpoints for your architecture project. And those views and viewpoints are basically different stakeholders and what they see and how they are observing the pieces of the enterprise that they're working on. Let's say if we talk to an accountant and ask him, hey, can you explain, like, can you describe the enterprise to us? He will talk about numbers, right? He will talk about, like, I know we have those balance sheets, we have the P&L, we have those reports, and this is like those are the assets that we have. But if you talk to, let's say, a system administrator and tell him, hey, can you explain what this enterprise is about? He will talk about the infrastructure, the computers, the servers, the database that they have, where they host their data, etc. So if you talk to, let's say, someone from production, let's say that's a production enterprise, you're like manufacturing something, he will talk about the machines, he will talk about the processes, the delivery, and stuff. So you have to capture all these views and viewpoints and align all of that together. So when you're making this architecture changes, improving your enterprise, cleaning up this room, basically, if you get back to that example, you don't leave something aside, and in that way make it not effective. Because you cannot just forget about one part of or several parts of enterprise when you're doing that change. So you will have to work with enormous amount of stakeholders, not necessarily you personally as an enterprise architect, but parts of your architecture team will have to work with enormous enormous groups of people, stakeholders, and stakeholder management, analysis, and engagement is very important part of enterprise architecture or business architecture projects, so as it is in business analysis. So we constantly building those bridges to the business analysis. And like, this is why I got interested in that subject, and I was trying to engage more BAs from my team, from my company, into that, because it's really similar. It's on a different level. It's definitely more complicated and on a larger scale, but in the essence, it's very similar.
So what we do as business analysts, we communicate a lot. What business architects do a lot, they communicate a lot, right? So there are many things that are common within business analysis, business architecture, enterprise architecture. That's why they are so connected, in fact. And by the way, you mentioned views and viewpoints, and those who are certified business analysts, or at least they read BA they might remember requirements architecture, which also has different views and viewpoints. So there's another similarity between two jobs. But anyway, you mentioned that you started your path at some point to business architecture and that you tried to involve your team, your company into that to
Mhm.
push that direction. And well, maybe you could share how one could become a business architect or enterprise architect. What were your first steps, your first baby steps on this way, and how did you become an enthusiast in this area?
It all started, I think it all started back in 2017. There was a guy in our company who came from the enterprise background, and he brought this knowledge of the enterprise architecture as a domain, and he mentioned Zachman framework. So he was certified Zachman specialist. I don't know what is the proper name for that, Zachman architect. And I get interested in that, so I tried to read and study the Zachman framework, and it looked so complicated to me. And I thought, like, oh, I cannot understand anything. There was a bit of disappointment, and some time passed. And in my company, there is this rule that you cannot be promoted to a senior level, to a senior business analyst level, unless you get a certification from a certain, from a certain organization. And a lot of people choosing IABA to get the CBAP certification, CCBA certification. And I was never a fan of that, because I work with business analysis. I read the book many times. This is like a core thing that I do. and I wanted, if I get prepared for certain certification, that I like learn something else, something different, which can enforce me as a specialist. And then I got back to, and one of the certifications that was in the list was TOGAF, and that's also like our enterprise architecture, yeah, open group enterprise architecture framework. And then I said, yeah, okay, let's give it another try. So I started reading it, and I also had the same feeling that I had when I first encountered with Zachman architecture. That I cannot, there's it's interesting. I kind of feel that I need this, but I cannot grasp it, and it was so like irritating. But I continued, just reading through that through the talk of standard, reading some articles that like, hey, can you just explain what that term is or what that concept is? And then at some point, I stumbled upon the video by Craig Martin. I don't know, maybe your listeners can look it up. So he's also like an enterprise architect, and it's just a very low quality video. He was like there with like a whiteboard, or maybe even a blackboard, and just explaining what enterprise architecture is and drawing stuff on the whiteboard. And at that point, like, I think the knowledge that I read, and my background, because I also came from like an enterprise background before I went to the software industry, and that video, something clicked, and in one basically one day, it all, like, like, this is amazing feeling when you like finally getting to an end of a puzzle, like when all the parts are at the right place. So it clicked for me, and now I was able to understand and grasp those concepts and put it all in, like, in one picture, and understanding how to apply it on the actual enterprise project. And from that on, it was, only the matter of time that I got certified. After I got certified, I felt like this is amazing feeling to know this stuff, and it helps you really to work with enterprise clients, because we as business analysts usually, in a software company, software service companies, we work either with enterprise clients, or we work with like also like product companies, software companies. So when we work with the software companies, it's easier because they are speaking the same language that we do. We understand the concepts of software development, etc. When we're working with the enterprise customers, it's usually much harder because they have their own like background, and they all views, and they're all their own like vocabulary and terminology, and it's a whole complicated world. And I wanted to make it simple, more simple to my team, to my business analysts in the company, to work with enterprise customers. So I thought, hey, I will create a short training on TOGAF, and I will explain how it works, how you should build enterprise architecture. And then we come to this my never-ending story of trying to explain it, trying to deliver that information, and sometimes hitting the brick wall with that, because like people were just saying, hey, okay, that sounds like really complicated, but I cannot understand how I can apply all of that to my project. And the key here is, when you are a business analyst, you cannot apply all of that to your projects. But understanding of that, you kind of know how your smaller project, how your software development project fits into bigger schema. And you can understand how it brings value to the enterprise. And from there, you can understand like which stakeholders will be affected, or which parts of the enterprise will be affected. Who do you need to talk to? Who do you need to engage in that project? And it makes it much more simple for you to understand what's going on. And, but when you put it in that simple sentence, no one believes you. So I understand what's going on without that, but it's not true. You sometimes don't, and then many times you don't. You just, and when I talk sometimes to the BA, and he's explaining to me, like, I'm asking him, can you explain to me a business? You're a business analyst. Like, what business are you like doing this for? They struggle sometimes because they only know the system, the solution, and what it can do, but they don't know why and how it affects the bigger schema, if we're talking about the enterprise clients. So this is how I got into that. So what advices I can give to BAs? So first of all, uh, do not start with Zachman framework. Try to read Togaf, uh, try to read Togaf standard, and just try to understand like how familiar it is to you. Try to map it to a certain enterprise, something that you know. Maybe it's your own company, your own software company if you're working in the software, or your own like enterprise if you're working there. It will be easier. Then find this video from Craig Martin. This is something that made it for me. And yeah, then just be enthusiastic about that. You cannot enforce something on a person, never. So if it's not something that you're interested in, or it does this thing for you, you probably should not force yourself into. But I do have like several successful cases when people got interested in my organization. They got interested in the enterprise architecture, and they got certified, and I see how their career progressed. Like all of them are lead BAs right now, like all of them. And that's something very heartwarming for me.
I hope that that wouldn't be the only thing that people get from this part, that to become a lead, you need to learn enterprise architecture. The last part,
No,
yeah.
no, for sure not. That's Yeah, but that's one of the ways to
One
get
of the
there.
perks, one of the perks, yeah. Well, I do agree with you that enterprise architecture and business architecture, they are so complex. I've been to Zachman's talk. He did a talk for Ukrainian community, I believe, or
Right.
yes,
Yes.
yes, that was one. And it was PMI, I believe, who organized that. And or maybe I'm wrong, but anyway, and it was an hour long talk about his framework. And well, how much I respect him, but at the same time, it was a bit of fun to see how people were switching on their cameras first to be there, but gradually they were switching their camera off, and by the end of his speech, no one was with the camera switched on, because it's so complex.
Yes.
It's
Correct.
so very different from what we do. It's so holistic that it's very hard to comprehend at the first time. And also, I've recently been dismayed to one of the conferences, and it was in Sweden, and most of the speakers were business or enterprise architects. Needless to say that I was confused all the time by the content. I barely understood anything, to be told. Well, I understood some stuff when they started talking about the UML, for example, about class diagrams, and I
Mhm.
even had a couple of talks with the speakers after that. But 90% of the time it was completely new to me, because I never studied or been enthusiast for business or enterprise architecture before that. Right, only after that I started trying to understand what is Bisbok, what's Togaf,
Yeah.
what's Zachman, like in depth. And by the way, I understood that the business architecture community seems to be like a bit secluded, because you couldn't get the bespoke without their invitation or something. I might be saying
Right.
something wrong, but I believe that was kind of thing, right? You need to be invited into the community, so you need to make your name first.
Yeah. So let me comment on what you just said. First of all, about John Zachman. He's an exceptional professional, definitely, but a guru in this domain. But even he could not, hold the audience for this 1.5 hour about this speech. And I remember I was also listening to that live, and I was doing like all sorts of things. I was like washing dishes, listening to that. I was like, vacuum cleaning into my apartment, listening to that. And it was very hard, even for me, who a person who understands a lot of things about that. So imagine how and even if John couldn't do that, what chances do I have to explain it in the same amount of time? So that is a very complicated subject, but it works with a very complicated entity, the enterprise. Yeah, we talked about that earlier. It's so complicated. It's like the one of the analogies that I like is that this CAS, complex adaptive systems, like a human brain or immune system or the ecosystem in a certain like area. That's how complex the enterprise is. Actually, it's constantly changing. It's constantly adapting. And this is why the domain working with that is also very complicated and hard to explain in a nutshell. On the secluded society, it's not that secluded. There is this not the BA, business architecture guild that you just have to buy the membership, and this is how you get the access to BizBalk. But this is what makes it secluded, yeah, because you really have to be interested in that to invest money into that. And you have like a subscription, you pay a yearly fee, and you get access to BizBalk and to the webinars, into the community itself. And the community is really interesting, and the BizBalk itself is really cool book. I really liked it. I like this. It's a huge. It's like Tolkien size, but but there's a lot of interesting stuff in there.
That's what I'm basically saying. It's less accessible than other professions. For example, if you want to become a
Right.
project manager, you
Yes.
just go to the internet, you type project management, and you have a lot of materials, right? But for business
Yeah.
architecture,
In one
enterprise,
month, you are the project manager.
exactly, exactly. And the BA and EA professions, it's not the same, absolutely. So you need to invest first to even
Yes.
understand it. Well, of course, you can
Right.
see videos like this, but there are not that many of them. Or you need to invest into go into conferences where they speak about business and enterprise architecture. There are a couple of them, at least I know, one in London. Uh, on the yeah, actually, I know only one in London that's done by IRM UK, and that's it. It's
Uh-huh.
because I follow them and I know. But otherwise, when I do a lot of conference support, I couldn't say that I encountered a lot of the conference on the topic because the topic is quite complicated and not that many people probably working on it.
Yeah, that's true. There's like a handful of people working on that, of course. I mean, like I think in Open Group they mentioned that they have like around 300 architects like working on the standard and improving the standard. But again, 300 people is not that much, you know. And to what you just said about like how to become, there's very important essential thing that you need to have to become an enterprise architect or software architect for that matter is the experience. Yeah, you cannot just go finish a course and become one. Before I got certified, I had maybe a 10-year career in different enterprises like manufacturing, construction, and after that I worked like almost for 7 years in software development as a business analyst, and only after that, it all clicked to me, and also not at the first time, as I mentioned earlier. So you have to have this experience and the background, and the age maybe. Yeah, I don't want to sound ageistic here, but you cannot just become an enterprise architect off like an as a graduate of the school or university. Yeah, you have to go through those challenges, and you have to fail multiple times. You have to stumble upon some stuff and learn from that. So that is also something as an essential component of becoming, let's say, an enterprise architect. And I don't want to call myself an enterprise architect. I'm just an enthusiast of this direction. But this is why there's just a handful of people doing that, because it's too complicated. The path is also complicated, and it's this way is not for everyone.
Not for weak ones. Yeah, that's absolutely
Not
true.
for weak ones. Yes.
It's a great thing that you said about the experience because it definitely feels that enterprise and business architecture is for experienced ones. Because when I encounter people who have this title, they are much more mature than I am, right? So this is a profession for mature people who have life experience first, not only like education. Because when you deal with business on a high level and you deal with business on things that are very different from IT, actually, we both have IT background as business analysts. We are used to living in our IT bubble, in our technological bubble, where we talk about features and stuff. And we have this very slight connection to business, in fact. We talk about business, we talk about goals, but we don't do business. Enterprise and business architects, they do business. And relationship with people and building them and stuff that happens is very different. So yeah, you really need life experience and business experience and a lot of expertise to become one. That's true. But anyway, there is of course a way to become one, and there are some different skills that people can learn to make their first baby steps in this way. So maybe you can share what kind of education would be helpful besides business analysis. Maybe maybe you can share which skills are important to become one and what you can get into your pool of knowledge and experience before applying for this profession.
Maybe let's brainstorm here, because I don't want to be like just one stating things, and because I also don't know a lot, right? So let's brainstorm. So for me, like, one of the interesting things that I also did, working on in my company, and I don't know if you mentioned that in the introduction of me, but I do work with like a business analysis competency in the company. And one of the ideas for us was to introduce like a business architecture direction, or like level, as sort of like a career path for our business analysts, so they could grow further, because there's just always a limit to where you can get as a business analyst career wise. And I was doing a research, and I was actually looking at the Business Architecture Guild webpage, where they have vacancies there, yeah, and they are looking for business architects. And I have like a list of hard skills which are required from business architects. So let's go through that list. Uh, I will start from the bottom. It's more interesting like that. So, strong modeling skills. You have to know a lot of modeling notations. As I mentioned earlier, like diagrams and like some sort of models is one of the key deliverables that architects are doing. So you will have to have strong modeling skills, and this is something you can learn, right? You have to learn UML, you have to learn BPMN, but also on top of that, there is a notation called Archimate, there is Iris, there is IDF 0. And if you are proficient in all of those notations, this is a good, I'd say, starting point for uh, obtaining the skills that you need. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would add that you need strong business knowledge because you'll be working with business mostly. And you need a lot of communication skills. And they're very different, probably, from what you do as a business analyst. Or maybe those skills that you start using at a senior level. Because when you do business architecture, there's a lot of negotiation, and they are sometimes quite tough, not for the weak. And there is a lot of
Right.
politics that happen in business. And as a business analyst, you usually might have just a slight understanding what those politics are. And there are things
Right.
outside of like profession stuff that you need to understand how to deal with really difficult situations, how to deal with lawsuits, maybe. So I think that also the knowledge that you need to get, and also a set of skills from different professions actually, because when you are a business or enterprise architect, you become the part of business itself more than business analyst, and you actually start thinking like entrepreneur, right? You think what are the business flows, what are the money flows, how to optimize things, and you become closer to owners on this stage. If business analyst, you of course you are responsible for a lot of things, right? But
Mhm.
you are not responsible for the money, for the people jobs usually. But as a business architect, for example, when you introduce a new business function or you redo business processes, some people may lose their jobs, right? And that's also some decisions that you need to make, and that's another skill, to make tough decisions and decisions in general.
Yeah, you really jumped to the core. I had this like at the top of my list, I would say, but you really hit the spot. So that exactly, this is the most complicated thing. The business knowledge, the knowledge of the exact domain that you're working with, will be essential for you. Being able to communicate effectively, being able to engage and negotiate, exactly. Decision making. This is also very good. Very good points. Also budgets. Yeah, you have to be good with numbers, because you will have like a certain budget given to you for this project, and you will have to manage it, and you will have to know how to manage that. So you have to have some financial skills, not in a way that you will like change a financial function of the enterprise. You can use subject matter experts for that, but you will have to have financial skills to do your like budgeting, right? To work with the budgets and to work with numbers. What also we can mention here is again the architecture frameworks, because you cannot do enterprise architecture just on a certain feeling. Yeah, even if you're super experienced a person and you have like millions of years. I mean, you cannot have millions of years, but you have like, I don't know, 20 years of experience in a certain industry. To change the whole enterprise, you just cannot do it like, on your based on your feeling. So you have to be familiar with the enterprise frameworks, with the enterprise architecture frameworks. And one of those we have mentioned already, it's Togaf, it's Zachman. You may want to be a certified person. You may be a certified in, like, again, Zachman or Togaf, or CBA, like, which is a certified business architect. This is from the Business Architecture Guild. And you cannot just get the certification without knowing those frameworks. Basically, those certification prove that you know the framework very well, and you have to know this framework. You just cannot go without any frameworks. Of course, you can try to create one on your own, but I would not go there, because you would invest a lot of hours, efforts, and uh, money, and the result might not be sufficient enough. So definitely knowledge of a certain architecture framework, or several ones, would be a benefit, and this is where you can also start and get that, basically a hard skill. Because communication is rather a soft skill. Yeah, it's much harder, and it's much harder, from my opinion, to get a soft skill that you need than a hard skill. Hard skill you can just learn, but the soft skill, it's not that easy. I mean, for me, I get this question like, hey, how do you get the soft skills? What do I need to read to get the soft skills? That I don't know this book. Do you know the book that you can read to get the soft skills?
Well, I'm sure you can find a couple of them. There is Simon Sinek, for example, Leaders Eat Last, or Radical Candor. There's another great book on soft skills. But yeah,
Right,
I'd say that if you read about skills that are considered core or professional or hard skill, there are different
right.
names, like, for example, UML modeling, right? You just
Yeah.
read the umldiagrams.org or watch one of my videos, and you get, okay, under 10 minutes now I know all the elements of this notation, and I can try drawing mine, right?
Hmm.
If it's non-executable, then I just draw it, I create it, and show it, and everybody's on board. But for example, for
Correct.
communication, and no, no let's take another. I love using this example. There is an underlying competency which is underappreciated, which is not talked a lot about. It's humor, right? Humor
All
is a
right. Yeah.
very impressive thing that works greatly during presentations, during communication, during during difficult periods within the teams, or for example, obscene language, right? Bad words that you
Right.
shouldn't say.
Yes.
I'm not on
Yes.
board with saying a lot of bad words, but I know that there are some people who communicate in that way a lot because that's part of their nature. So you can either get on board with them and be a part of what they consider like their part of life, or you can get against antagonized against them, and just fail your communication from the very beginning. So yeah, these are the skills that are not obtainable that easy. It's not easy to read between the lines, right? You need to use that a lot and really get it just from experience, just at all. When your
Yeah.
parents told you when you were a kid that you will understand like 30 years later, yeah, it works like that. Absolutely.
Oh man, that's true. And I take back what I said before. It was actually a very stupid thing. There's like uh, tons of books on soft skills, but what I meant to say is that you cannot get them just by reading the book. Yeah, you can get some hard skills by reading the book, but you cannot get, and perfect thing that you mentioned about the humor and obscene language. this is exactly what I've been like living by the last couple of days and the last couple of years even. And I remember, back in the days, I used to work. My position were like a financial controller, but what I do realize I did a lot of business analysis back then, and I was working on the like a manufacturing company, steel production, and I had to go like almost every day. I had to go to the production site and to talk to like guys who produce coke, and they produce metal and steel and stuff. Obscene language is what helped me with communication with these guys. This is like something that you have to use, otherwise you just do not get into the circle, right? So yeah, being able to adapt, being able to use your humor, and sometimes the obscene language. These are the key things, and you cannot really learn this from books. I mean, you can read the book. Hey, what are the like 100 curse words that you can use? But I mean, uh, you have to live. You have to live there. You have to live by it.
Yes, actually, there are a lot of jobs that are in a different way tied to swearing. Some people work as guards in prisons, for example, and
Right.
of course their parents taught them not to swear, of course, but they work with specific people who chose their path, right? And they need to understand how to communicate with those people. And well, sometimes when you make there are projects in IT, for example, when you make software for prisons. It's not just one project out there, there's whole industry
Yes.
around that.
Yes.
And
Very
you
familiar with that.
Okay, so yeah, you understand how that you need to communicate with people who communicate with other people. And if you don't even
Right.
use those curse words, you need to understand what sometimes is behind those words, right? It's
Yeah.
part
What's
of
the terminology?
it's part of the domain knowledge, yeah, you get. Yeah, and
Exactly.
sometimes in business everything is done by cursing. And yeah, well, it's somehow it works. You may think that on high level, on C level, people are just this black tie and suits and stuff, or the lawyers, they are always pretty in the movies, but in fact what happens in real life is different. And yeah, that's not a skill, of course, that you might need at some point to become a business architect and communicate with some layers of people. But anyway,
Yeah, that's not something that's not something that you would see in like a vacancy for a job, right? But you have to read between the lines. And if we have maybe like 2 minutes, I just remember an interesting fact again about like the curse words. A couple of years ago, we were doing a project, and like you have to estimate the efforts for a certain feature or like a user story or whatever, and we were using the term a lot. We have to estimate the efforts. And the client, they was saying like, hey, you're saying efforts like f words. And then we were like just laughing about it all the time, like, how many f words do we need to get this feature to production? And that was really fun. So that kind of like where you meet the humor and the obscene language. I wonder how we switched to that subject. By the way, I think you need like a new title for your podcast, like for this episode, like maybe enterprise architecture and curse words or something like that.
maybe, yeah. But sometimes you really need a lot of F words to get job done. That's true. That's just a lot.
Exactly.
So we just shared a lot about this tough job. It's tough out there, and the question is it worth it, right? So could you get a lot of money for that? Are there big bucks in salaries? And is there a demand for business architects, maybe within specific industries or in general? Could you share a little on that?
Yes and yes. So you can get a big buck out of that. But we have to be specific on like market we're talking about. If you're asking about Ukraine, then the demand for such role is really low these days. This is like underdeveloped profession. Yeah, as a consultant market as well, right? I mentioned earlier that business architect essentially is a consultant who may join your enterprise for a couple of years to build something and then move on. And this is like not a routine job that you have to like do in a certain enterprise all the time. In some cases, maybe you have to. But in Ukraine, the market is like absolutely non-existing for this profession. But in the world, like I've been researching, like Europe, Asia, US, there is a demand and there is a big buck for that profession because it's so hard, because it's so because it's so complicated to get there. There's not enough people who can do that. But there is a lot of demand because most of the enterprises need that. And you know how all those enterprises grow, right? They start small, and then you start accelerating and growing and growing and growing, and no one's thinking about the architecture of what you're trying to become at this point. Very similar to software, right? You start as a small application, but then somehow you have like enterprise clients, and then you're trying to scale, and you create a lot of crunches, and you create a lot of like some things along the way that are not there to last, but you just need something fast. And this is how you create this monster. And now it's very heavy, and now it's very difficult to make a decision. It's like a dinosaur, you're like making a certain decision, and but once your tail is moving or your like paws are moving, this decision is already not needed. It's outdated. And this is how many enterprises become like that, and they are desperately needing changes and re-architecting. And yeah, so I would say that's a good career opportunity, but as we mentioned again, you have to be strong enough. And again, I do hope that in Ukraine, in some time, in some years, we will also have a demand for that, because we have to do a lot of reconstruction. Uh, Basically, the actual reconstruction and the reconstruction of the systems and the enterprises in the organization. And that's actually the enterprise architect. They like if we talk about the government, and if we talk about governmental organization, they are also enterprise, right? You not necessarily have to be a business. You just have to be a complicated organization. So enterprise architects are really needed in some of the let's say governmental institutions that we have. And if you did some analysis, you can see like some ministries are working very effectively, and some not so effective. And that is let's say we have some room for improvement there. So I would say like those people, the enterprise architects, they may not be called like that, right? They may be just called like transformation manager, or I don't know, transformation lead, or maybe just a director. But this is like the essence of what they're doing. They're transforming the organization to become better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would agree that in Ukraine, there is a lot of things we could do to promote business and enterprise architecture. Well, Ukraine historically is more of IT outsourcing market, and it's not a consulting market yet. So
Mhm.
there are things to do in that direction. Absolutely. At the same time, what I experienced from Europe side, it feels like it's some regions of the world like Ukraine, Poland, Malaysia, South Africa are about business analysis, but the northern part of Europe, like Sweden, Norway, and not Amsterdam, Netherlands, all those countries are about business architecture because it feels like there are more
Hmm.
business architects than business analysts out there. If you go to LinkedIn, for example, you get that impression.
Yeah, interesting observation, Yuri. And I think, like, I mean, I'm not an expert, but I think those countries are much more organized than, than the other ones. Like when you just get there, you see how organized everything is. Everything goes by the rule. It's very clean. It's very like neat, and maybe that is background of that.
So we talked about the profession, how it works, what skills you need, and there are stuff that business architects do, of course. And now the question: after they do all that stuff, is there a way to measure the success of enterprise architecture, business architecture?
Absolutely. It's very similar to business analysis. Again, in business analysis, we have this solution evaluation area, right? And this is the same thing. So you set up the goals, what you're trying to reach, and how to measure. And you always can throw in SMART in there. Specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time bound goals. And then and you do like what you do, because like enterprise architecture projects, they're huge usually, so you cannot just measure it at the end. You create a set of like transition stages. They are called like transition architectures. So those are like let's call them milestones that you have to get to a certain point, and at a certain milestone you have your own like uh, success criteria, right? They can be both about the architecture project and about the solution, like the effectiveness of our of enterprise. They can be about a lot of different stuff. Again, if we refer to the domains, there can be some business things, like you can measure certain processes, you can measure like a revenue, you can measure a client cooperation or return of clients, etc. If you're changing that part, and we can talk about like application architecture. Let's say you want to collapse certain products that you don't use, and you want to have your IT landscape uh, easier, fitter. So you had, let's say we had like 50 different applications. We want to lower this number to, let's say, 20. So this is things that you can measure, and you can set those goals, and you can set those like success criterias and the measurements for them for each step of your architecture project. And this is also a task for enterprise architect to define those things, to get like them aligned with all the key stakeholders, that these are the success criteria, and we are measuring them. Of course, as our world is really moving in a very fast pace, and business goals, they may change, business context may change. So these are good points of time to reevaluate, like, are we going in the right direction with our architecture project, or do we maybe need to change something and go in a slightly different path. You cannot be as agile as you can with the software development projects. Of course, you cannot like change the direction, or add some new requirements like every couple of weeks. But with the architecture projects, this is also something that you can do, but on a larger scale, like each maybe half a year you can do a review and see if we're meeting the goals, if we're doing the right thing, if we go in the right direction. So definitely you can measure that, and when you're done with the architecture project, you have all the goals and the success criteria met, then you have created an effective solution, meaning like effective enterprise or business.
Let's now switch to personal insights about business architecture and enterprise architecture. So, were your biggest challenges on your way? So, you shared about the complexity, of course. You shared about not that much information, but were there maybe specific things that people could learn about and not to make the same mistakes, probably, or make their life easier on their way to those professions?
Right. If we talk about like how to get the certification, because basically certification would be a proof that you at least know your theory, you know the frameworks, you know the techniques and the approaches. So I would recommend TOGAF because it's really accessible. You don't have to be part of any like closed community to get to that. It's available online. You don't have to buy it, and it's I wouldn't say it's simple to understand. Of course not, but at least it's simple to get to it and to obtain it. And of course, I would advise to try to uh, get to some webinars with the enterprise architects. And once you're listening to what they're saying, and you just you cannot grasp the information, just make notes of the concepts that they were talking about, and then do your own research. And when you're doing your own research, try to map the concepts. And enterprise architects, they will talk about concepts all the time. They love conceptualization. Let's conceptualize the business, let's conceptualize the approach, etc. So uh, try to do your own research and map those concepts to the actual things that you have in your profession or in your like organization where you work in. Many of us, if you never work in the organization, if you did not work in the enterprise, just forget about it. You have to be there in order to be able to just map your own experience. You don't have to be like a C level, you don't have to be like a manager necessarily. You can be just part of a certain department, but you can say, okay, this is where we are, this is how we fit into the whole system, these are like my view, my like viewpoint, and etc. So try to map it to your actual experience. Yeah, if you don't have experience working in the enterprise, again, get that experience. You have to you have to go there and work there for some time just to understand how things are. you mentioned politics, you mentioned like some rules and how you have to read between the lines. And you cannot grasp that once you're like outside of the whole organization. You have to be inside. So that's something that I would also advise. If we're talking about certification, coming back to that, like for me, it was very helpful to just get the tests to my phone. There is like you can search in the app store. I think it was $5 or $7. This just program where you just run through the tests. And I was doing that, whenever I have some free time. Right now I'm just playing chess online, but before that I was just going through some tests. I'm waiting like in line for something to see, let's say, a doctor, and I'm like passing those tests. I'm at the conference room waiting for my call to begin. I'm passing the tests, and I'm just doing that all over again. And you getting really prepared for those tests, and that will really help you to pass the certification. And whenever you don't understand the question, yeah, here's another research for you. Just go in and try to understand that. And today, and this is all pre-chat gpt stuff, right? I don't even know how more equipped you are right now with AI. So you can, I think, use that for your advantage, and try to ask those questions from let's say chat gpt. Like, what is, let's say, building block in enterprise architecture? Can you give me an example? Can you explain it to me as I'm 5 year old? You can do all this stuff with the Chat GPT right now. So I think I would really recommend to use this technology also into your learning path.
You mentioned that there are people. You mentioned that Craig person. I forgot the last name. You mentioned the
Craig Martin.
yes, Craig Martin. So there are people to follow. There are different organizations to follow. Open Group and Architects Guild.
Mhm.
So are there any specific people maybe to follow to learn from about business architecture, enterprise architecture? Are there any books, resources? So what can you suggest to people to start learning?
So I'm following just two organizations. I'm following Open Group, and I'm following the Business Architecture Guild. So I do see value in both of those groups. I would maybe suggest starting with the open group, because it really is open. It's open group. You don't have to buy anything to get access to the content, at least for now. One of the books that I would like to recommend is this one. It's called Building Business Solutions. Is it? No. Yes. It's called Building Business Solutions, and it talks about actually business rules. A lot of interesting information here. So this is one of the books that I'm constantly referring to, reading. There is like a newer edition, but I only have this one. So the author is Roland G. Ross and Gladys Lamb, and I think they're also like sponsored by IABA. So again, very very close to business analysis. Again, not many books. There are not many books around business architecture. I would highly recommend BizBook, because it's like a huge book with a lot of information, needed information, useful information. And what is also great, that it's constantly being like updated, rewritten. So when you have the access to this source of knowledge, you can be sure that it's like up to date. So that's something I would probably advise.
Probably we uncovered a lot today about business architecture, but I have one last question for you. How do you see the future of business architecture, enterprise architecture, business analysts growing into that direction?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And I've been thinking about that a lot. And I've been also doing some research on LinkedIn on the actual business architects. And I was like specifically looking for certified CBA architects. Like those people, they are definitely committed to this field. And they're not just titling themselves as business architect in LinkedIn, because everyone can just title himself. So and many of these people, in their background, I saw business analysts background. So I do really feel that this is a next step for many business analysts. Not for everyone, of course. Some of them may choose management direction, some of them may choose like product management direction. But there's also a very interesting field, which is a business architecture. And I really hope and I feel that this can be a future, that there will be more and more business architects growing from this experienced business analysts who we have now, like a lot. Yeah, this profession, business analyst, is also not that old, right? You didn't have a lot of business analysts maybe 15 years ago, right? But now they're everywhere. Especially, like, when I get to my job, they're everywhere. So I do expect that this can be a very good opportunity, an interesting opportunity for these people to grow. So I do expect getting more and more business architects out there, enterprise architects out there, and there's definitely a demand for such profession. As we spoke about this before, there are a lot of enterprise and organizations that need or will need help of such professionals in the future. So yeah, I am very positive about the future of this organization, and not the organization, about the future of this profession. And I do hope that there will be more communities, more initiatives around this subject, and people will try to spread the knowledge more, let's say, effectively, and share the knowledge more frequently. That is coming, that is happening right now.
Yeah, let's hope it's gonna be exactly like that.